The Christmas you picture is younger than the light bulb. Tonight we trace trees, stockings, carols, and Santa, and a Victorian trend changes everything. If this helps you settle, tap like, so it's easy to find tomorrow. Picture a winter evening that arrives early and quietly. The sky is dark before dinner, and the world feels smaller. In many places, this is when celebrations begin to cluster. Not because a calendar demands it, but because bodies notice winter. Winter is a biological threshold as much as it is a season. Less daylight gently nudges our internal clock to shift. The eyes are part of the system, measuring day length without effort. That light signal helps set hormones like melatonin for sleep timing. In winter, people often feel a gentle pull toward earlier evenings. At higher latitudes, the change can be dramatic and unmistakable. The longest nights also create a clear marker in the sky. The sun reaches its lowest daily path near the winter solstice. Many old calendars treated that turning point as a useful reference. It is a natural checkpoint, like a quiet hinge in the year. Mornings can feel slower, and nights can feel longer. That drift is normal, and it shapes what people want to do. When light is scarce, small routines become anchors. A repeated ritual can calm a busy mind by being predictable. You do not have to decide what happens next, because the pattern does. That is soothing when the year has been noisy and crowded. Many winter traditions start as simple scheduling tools. They tell a community, we gather now and we rest a little. They also tell the brain, you are safe enough to soften. Even today, a familiar holiday routine can feel like a lullaby. It is structure offered gently without much effort. Now add the oldest winter fact of all. Scarcity used to be real. Before modern shipping and refrigeration, winter meant fewer fresh foods. People relied on stored grains, dried fruit, and roots in cool cellars. Animals needed feed, and feed could run low by midwinter. Work in the field slowed, so time opened up indoors. That combination made gathering both possible and useful. You could share warmth, share stories, and share what you had. Indoor life also changes how culture travels. Songs, tales, and prayers are easier to pass along by firelight. Children listen, adults mend tools, and everyone hears the same lines. That repetition is how customs survive for centuries. And you could check on neighbors without making a big fuss. Feasts are part of this story, and they are more practical than they seem. A community meal is a kind of social technology. A shared table also reduces risk in a very simple way. If one household had less, the group could smooth it out. Even small gifts can act like tokens of trust. They say, I see you, and I remember you. It creates a moment where resources flow toward those who need them. It also creates memory, so people remember who showed up. In hard years, that memory matters in quiet ways. In many cultures, generosity becomes a rule around winter festivals, not always written down, but felt and repeated. Give now and you belong to the group that gives. Belonging was another kind of insurance against cold days. Some winter feasts also match older farming cycles. Late autumn slaughter could be timed when fodder was limited. Fresh meat would not last long, so sharing made sense. Preserving also followed, with salting, smoking, and slow drying. Feasting and saving happened side by side, without contradiction. It was comfort, but it was also planning. And planning feels calming, even when no one says the word. If you are still awake, we are simply turning the page. Alongside food, winter celebrations often carry two quiet proofs: light and green. Light starts as warmth and safety, plain and direct. A hearth, a lamp, a candle, a small circle against the dark. Those little lights help people move, cook, and care for each other. Of course, open flame required care and steady attention, so traditions often included rules about where fires and candles lived. Safety practices can later look like symbolism, even when they began practical. Over time, the practical glow becomes a symbol of reassurance. It says the night is here and we can still make a home. That is why candles appear again and again in winter customs. So do fires, lanterns, and logs that are kept burning. Even when electric lights arrive, the emotional meaning stays. Now think about plants, especially the ones that refuse to look defeated. Evergreens keep their color when most branches go bare. Holly holds glossy leaves, and ivy keeps climbing when it can. To a winter eye, that green is a simple promise. It suggests that life is resting, not ending. Bringing green indoors makes that promise feel closer. It also adds a fresh scent to rooms closed against the cold. These plant choices are not random decorations. They are a quiet way to say spring will return. In different regions, the exact plants change, but the idea repeats. People use what grows nearby, and meanings gather around it. Light and green work well together too. Green says life persists, and light says we can see it. That pairing is so satisfying that it keeps coming back. You will notice it in trees, wreaths, candles, and later, electric strings. And you will notice it beyond Christmas and other winter festivals as well, because winter is shared, even when traditions differ. Now, let us lay a gentle map of the night we are exploring. We will move slowly tradition by tradition, like turning pages. First, we ask about dates and why certain days were chosen. Then we visit plants and the evergreen layer that came first. After that comes the tree, from public spaces to living rooms. Then lights, from flame to filament to tiny safe bulbs. Then gifts and visits and the social logic inside them. Then stockings and small rituals that travel across borders. Then music, from doorsteps to choirs to radio and recordings. Then cards, when holiday cheer became something you could mail. Then nativity scenes, and how stories become scenes you can walk past. Then Santa and his cousins, and the many names he wears. Later, we will untangle the myths that repeat every year. And we will see how one era, especially the Victorian age, reshaped the picture. If you drifted for a moment, you can just rejoin here. This is a slow walk, and there is no need to hurry. With winter as our foundation, we can ask a technical question next. Why is Christmas on December 25th at all? Now we reach a surprisingly technical question, asked very gently. Why did Christmas settle on December 25th in so many places? Historians usually offer two main explanations, and both can be true. Different regions could arrive at the same date by different routes. Think of it like two rivers meeting in one quiet winter bay. One explanation is seasonal and symbolic, tied to the turning sun. Near the solstice, daylight stops shrinking and slowly returns. For many people, that feels like light being born again. Early Christian writers sometimes used light language for hope and renewal, so a midwinter feast could carry a calm message of returning light. This does not mean the date is a simple copy of older festivals. It means the season itself offered powerful imagery that many understood. The second explanation is more like arithmetic than astronomy. It is often called the calculation idea, and it starts with conception. Some early Christians linked Jesus' conception to a meaningful calendar day. Many later traditions place the Annunciation on March 25th. From conception to birth is roughly 9 months, so the birth lands in late December. This approach uses theology and timekeeping rather than public celebration. It also fits a wider ancient habit of linking beginnings and endings. Some writers like the idea of a perfect symmetry in sacred history. In that style of thinking, a great life begins and ends on matching dates. So the date can be built from internal logic, even without a solstice. Neither explanation is a single universal answer for every community. Evidence is uneven, and practices did not spread at the same speed. So careful historians keep their tones soft and their claims modest. They say, this is likely, here is the source, and here is what is missing. Now let us place this in the Roman world, where calendars mattered deeply. Rome already had a crowded late December, full of public rhythm and play. Saturnalia was one well-known festival, with feasting and role reversal. It began earlier in the month and could stretch for several days. The New Year's calends, on January 1st, also carried its own customs. These were not identical to Christmas in meaning or purpose, but they shared the same dark season, the same need for warmth and relief. Later writers sometimes blurred these edges when describing the past. Memory can compress many winter days into one long imagined party. So the overlap in timing can look like a direct borrowing, even when it is not. What we can document is more limited than what we often assume. We have calendars, sermons, letters, and a few official lists of feasts. We do not always have clear notes on what ordinary households did, so the honest move is to separate timing from meaning. A date can be shared, while the story and the rituals stay distinct. In some places, Christian feasts grew alongside older customs, not on top of them. In other places, older customs faded, but their winter mood stayed behind. This is why December can feel like layered music rather than one song. If you are still awake, we are just sorting the layers slowly. Now we add another quiet complication. Calendars do not behave perfectly. When a calendar system changes, dates can drift relative to the seasons. The Roman world used the Julian calendar for many centuries. Later, the Gregorian calendar was introduced to correct accumulated drift. Most countries eventually adopted the Gregorian calendar for civil life, but some churches kept older calendar rules for liturgical dates. This is one reason you may hear about Christmas on January 7th. It is not a different holiday, but a different calendar alignment. In many Orthodox traditions, December 25th on the Julian calendar falls later by today's civil count. So the church keeps the same named day, while the public date looks shifted. This can shape very practical things like school breaks and travel plans. It can also shape foods, because fasting and feasting windows move. Songs and community events can slide a little in the month as well. In some regions, the gift day and the church feast day are not the same. That mismatch creates local traditions that feel unique and personal, and it reminds us that a date is a tool, not just a label. Now let us look for early evidence of when the Nativity becomes prominent. By the 4th century, Christmas is clearly visible in parts of the church calendar. In Rome, a list sometimes called the Chronography of 354 includes a feast on December 25th. That suggests the date was established there by that period, at least officially. In the Eastern Mediterranean, another major feast was Epiphany on January 6th. In some places, Epiphany carried themes of baptism and manifestation. Over time, communities divided these themes into separate feasts on different days. Different regions negotiated the calendar like neighbors sharing a long fence. Some adopted December 25th earlier and some later. Preachers helped because sermons teach a feast how to be celebrated. John Chrysostom, preaching in Antioch in the late 4th century, discusses the December date. Augustine in North Africa also preaches on the Nativity with a settled seasonal rhythm. These sermons do not feel like brand new inventions each year. They feel like practices that are already becoming familiar to listeners. Once a feast is on the calendar, it begins to grow a season around it. Fasts prepare for it, and follow-up days echo it, like gentle afterglow. That structure spreads with bishops, traders, pilgrims, and imperial administration. Church calendars travel on roads, but also in stories and shared prayer. Local communities then add their own winter materials, plants, lights, and food. So December 25th is less a single origin story and more a meeting place. It is where astronomy, theology, and administration quietly agree to coexist. And because it is a meeting place, it becomes stable enough to build on. If you drifted, the short answer is twofold: solstice imagery and sacred calculation. History is calm like that, with firm dates and soft edges side by side. Keep that in mind because it will explain the 12 days later. We will soon see how Advent leads into Christmas and then into Epiphany. For now, let the date rest like a stone set gently in the path. Once the date is set, the season begins to grow around it, quietly. Once a date settles onto the calendar, it rarely stays alone. It grows a season around it, like frost spreading across a window. For Christmas, that season has 3 gentle landmarks: Advent, then the 12 days, then Epiphany. You can think of them as counting, then celebrating, then revealing. Let us start with Advent, the quiet art of waiting. In many Western churches, Advent begins on a Sunday in late November or early December. It is a structured countdown, but it is older than modern shopping hype. The word comes from a Latin idea of arrival or coming. In practice, Advent became a way to prepare the mind and the household. Preparation can be spiritual, practical, or simply emotional. And preparation has a calming effect because it makes the future feel shaped. A countdown is a small daily ritual, and small rituals soothe the brain. They reduce decisions and create gentle predictability. Light one candle, say one prayer, open one small window on a calendar. One step a day is easier than one big leap. In some regions and eras, Advent included fasting or restraint, not necessarily total hunger, but a softer way of eating and celebrating. The point was to hold back a little, so the feast day felt distinct. That rhythm of restraint and release is ancient and widespread. It appears in many religions because it fits human psychology well. You wait, you anticipate, you mark time in manageable pieces. And in winter, when nights stretch long, marking time matters. A week can feel like a long room to cross. Advent puts small lamps along the floor, so you can walk it slowly. Even where fasting was not strict, the mood could still be quieter. Church colors, hymns, and readings often shifted for the season. Some communities avoided loud parties until closer to Christmas. Others mixed sacred waiting with local fairs and winter markets. So Advent was never one single style across all of Europe. But the idea of a guided countdown repeats again and again. If you are still awake, keep it simple. Advent is the calm countdown before the main celebration. Now we reach the phrase that surprises many modern listeners: the 12 days of Christmas. Today, many people treat Christmas as the finish line. You rush toward December 25th, then everything stops. But historically, in many places, Christmas was the starting bell. The feast begins on December 25th and continues through early January. These days form a season of visiting, feasting, and community obligations. The 12 days end on January 5th, followed by Epiphany on January 6th. This is why old songs and plays treat Christmas as a long hallway, not a doorway. In a world with less artificial light and fewer winter distractions, extended feasting made sense. Work was slower, travel was hard, and indoor life encouraged long gatherings. House visiting traditions fit neatly into this window. You go to family, then neighbors, then the wider community. Hospitality becomes a rule with its own gentle logic. If someone visits, you offer something warm, even if it is small. A bite of bread, a cup of spiced drink, a seat near the fire. These are not luxuries, they are signals of belonging. And the signals are repeated, so no one has to wonder. Some places develop formal rounds of visiting, almost like a slow parade. Others focused on specific saint days inside the season. In parts of Europe, certain nights were known for masks and role play. This is where Twelfth Night enters as a social release valve. In England and elsewhere, Twelfth Night could include playful reversals. A bean in a cake might choose a temporary king for the evening. People sang, joked, and acted out a brief upside-down world. It was controlled mischief, not chaos, and it was often followed by a return to ordinary order. That pattern, tension then release, can feel oddly refreshing. It gives winter a pulse, like a heartbeat under heavy blankets. Now, why does this long season feel shorter today? Part of the answer is work calendars. Industrial timekeeping compresses holidays into a narrow block. Factory schedules, school terms, and national public holidays shaped what was possible. If you have only 1 or 2 days off, the season collapses toward the main day. Shopping also shifts attention earlier toward the weeks before Christmas. So the modern sense of Christmas ending on the 25th is not ancient. It is a newer compromise with work and commerce. You can still see the older shape in places that keep January holidays strong, and you can hear it in songs that assume a long festive stretch. If you drifted, the key point is gentle. Christmas used to be the beginning of a season, not the end. Now we step into Epiphany, and the story changes tone. Epiphany means something like manifestation or appearing. In Western Christian tradition, it is often linked to the visit of the Magi. These are sometimes called the three kings in popular storytelling. The story is less about crowns and more about recognition. A child is recognized as significant by outsiders who arrive bearing gifts. That recognition becomes a reason to celebrate on January 6th. In several countries, January 6th is a major gift day. In Spain, for example, many children traditionally receive gifts on Epiphany. Parades and community events can center on the Magi rather than Santa. In some Latin American traditions, this day also carries strong family meals. So a child might wait longer than December 25th for presents. That waiting builds a different kind of anticipation. It also changes how the whole season feels in the body. December becomes preparation, and January becomes the final glow. This variety matters when we later discuss gift bringers, because Santa is not the only character competing for the role. He shares the stage with the Magi, with St. Nicholas, and with others. Different places solve the gift question in different calendar slots. Now, one more gentle theme ties all this together. Church time blended with local winter time. Liturgical calendars offered structure, but local life added texture. Saint days landed inside the season like stepping stones. Village fairs and winter markets often clustered around these dates. In some towns, markets became the public face of Advent. In others, the main communal gatherings happened closer to Epiphany. Climate matters too. In northern regions, deep darkness makes candle customs feel central. In milder climates, outdoor processions and public squares stay active. Politics mattered as well, because reforms changed what was encouraged. After the Reformation, some Protestant regions reshaped the calendar emphasis. Some downplayed saints. Others kept community customs but changed the framing. Orthodox traditions often kept a different rhythm of fasting and feasting. So when someone says the Christmas season, it can mean different weeks. In one country, it feels like late November through December. In another, it stretches strongly into January. And in many families, it is a blend of church dates and school vacations. What stays consistent is the pattern underneath. Counting, then visiting, then feasting, waiting, then gathering, then one last bright day of meaning. If you are still awake, we are simply moving from time to sight. With the calendar in place, the next layer is visual. It is the plants and greenery that keep showing up every year. Now we move from dates to something you can hold in your hands. A sprig, a branch, a wreath on a door. In winter, plants become messages. They say, life is still here, even if it is resting. This is the plant layer of Christmas. It arrives before trees and lights in many places. It can be as simple as greenery tucked into a room. And it can be as formal as church decoration planned weeks ahead. Let us begin with holly and ivy, the classic winter pair. Holly is striking because it refuses to look fragile. It keeps glossy leaves, and in many regions it keeps bright berries. Ivy is different, quieter, a plant that clings and keeps going. Together, they look like endurance. In medieval Europe, churches and homes used winter greenery for decoration. This was not always calm and uncontroversial. People argued about what it meant to bring green into sacred space. Some clergy welcomed it as a natural sign of creation and renewal. Others worried that certain customs felt too close to older winter practices. That anxiety is not modern. Even in the Middle Ages, people debated what was acceptable and what was suspicious. The interesting detail is that the greenery often stayed anyway. Because it was useful, it was beautiful, and it carried a mood people wanted. Over time, Christian interpretations gathered around these plants. Holly could be read as a symbol of hardship and protection. Its sharp leaves suggested thorns to some interpreters. Its red berries suggested blood to others. But you do not need those readings to understand its appeal. In a dim room, red and green are vivid and comforting. Ivy gained its own set of meanings. Because it clings, it could symbolize loyalty or lasting attachment. Because it stays green, it could symbolize persistence. These meanings did not appear all at once. They accumulated slowly, like dust that becomes a soft layer. Songs helped fix the imagery in memory. Carols and poems repeated holly and ivy until they felt inevitable. When you hear this same pairing every winter, it becomes the season itself. That is how symbols stabilize. They stop feeling chosen and start feeling natural. If you are still awake, we are simply gathering branches one at a time. Now let us step under a different plant, hanging at a threshold. Mistletoe is not a typical evergreen, but it behaves like one in winter. It stays green while many trees go bare. It also has an unusual biology. Mistletoe is a parasitic plant, living on other trees and borrowing water and minerals. That strangeness made it feel powerful in folklore. In some ancient sources, mistletoe appears as a special plant with ritual associations. But here is the calm correction. A story about mistletoe is not the same as proof of a Christmas custom. Norse myths, for example, include mistletoe in the death of Balder. That tale is memorable, but it does not prove that medieval people kissed beneath mistletoe. It tells us the plant was culturally noticeable, not that the modern ritual existed then. The kissing custom, as most people know it, becomes popular much later. It spreads especially in the modern period, helped by print culture and parties. In other words, the custom is recent compared to the myth. Still, the doorway matters, and that part is older in spirit. Doorways are thresholds, and thresholds are special in folklore across many regions. A threshold is where outside becomes inside. It is where strangers become guests. It is where safety begins. So it makes sense that a small rule would live there. Stand here, pause here, exchange a gesture here. A kiss under mistletoe becomes a social permission slip. It turns an awkward moment into a scripted one. And scripted moments are exactly what winter rituals love to be. They lower uncertainty, even in playful ways. Different places added different rules. Sometimes a berry was removed after each kiss until none remained. Sometimes the rule was more symbolic than literal, but the core idea stayed gentle. A doorway decoration creates a tiny shared game. If you drifted, the key point is simple. Mistletoe feels ancient, but the kissing custom is mostly modern. And the doorway feels meaningful because thresholds always have been. Now we widen from single sprigs to circles of green. Wreaths are so common now that they feel timeless. But the specific Advent wreath with a ring of candles has a clearer history. Many accounts point to 19th century Germany for the modern Advent wreath tradition. It is often linked to a pastor and educator using candles to mark the days for children. Over time, the idea simplified into a smaller wreath with 4 candles, 1 candle for each Sunday of Advent in many Western churches. This is a good example of how a practical teaching tool becomes a tradition. Children ask, "How long until the feast day?" The wreath answers with light, 1 calm step at a time. The circle shape also does quiet work on the mind. A circle has no obvious start and no obvious end, so it can symbolize continuity without needing words. It is a shape that feels complete. That is why wreaths appear in many cultures beyond Christmas. But in winter, a circle of green feels especially reassuring. Materials vary by region, and this matters more than people think. Some wreaths are made of fir or pine. Some use laurel, rosemary, or other local plants that stay sturdy. Some use dried fruit, cones, or ribbons for contrast. In cities, people sometimes use artificial greenery for convenience. Even then, the symbolic job is the same. You are placing a small piece of enduring green in a place of arrival. A door, a wall, a table. A little forest made manageable. Now we come to a modern puzzle. Why does greenery stick, even in small apartments and busy lives? One answer is that it is low-effort nature for the brain. Green color and plant scent are simple cues. They suggest outdoors, seasons, and life continuing. Humans respond to these cues without trying. A short branch can change the feel of a room quickly. Another answer is that culture reinforces a narrow set of symbols. Stores repeat the same palette, the same plants, the same combinations. Films and cards echo them until they feel required. This repetition is not accidental. It is how a holiday becomes recognizable at a glance, and the plants are the easiest layer to add. You can do it with one wreath, one sprig, one small centerpiece. Even if you do nothing else, a bit of holly says, it is that season. If you are still awake, we are about to step into the biggest plant tradition of all. Because from small branches, the story grows taller. The tree is next, and it changes the room entirely. From small branches, we move to an entire indoor forest. We move to the Christmas tree. Now we arrive at the biggest piece of indoor greenery. The Christmas tree is not just decoration. It is architecture for a season. Once it is in the room, everything else gathers around it. But the tree did not begin as a universal Christmas symbol. It grows out of specific places, specific plays, and ordinary craft. The early traces cluster in German-speaking regions and nearby areas. You will also hear Baltic claims, and you will hear arguments about firsts. Those first tree arguments are often about civic pride. A city wants to be the birthplace of a beloved tradition. So the calm historian approach is simple. Look for records and treat pride stories gently. We do have records of winter greenery and decorated trees in late medieval and early modern Europe. They are not always the same thing as a modern living room tree. Sometimes they are outdoor community trees. Sometimes they are indoor stage trees for a play. One important strand is the paradise tree tradition. In medieval church and town drama, people performed religious stories. One popular theme was the Garden of Eden. Plays needed a tree that could carry symbolic fruit. In winter, an evergreen could stand in for a tree of life. Apples could be tied on bright against dark needles. So a winter evergreen becomes a stage prop and a teaching tool. It is not yet a cozy household centerpiece. It is a public object, seen by many at once. Guild halls and town halls also mattered. Guilds were associations of craftspeople, and they hosted feasts and gatherings. A decorated evergreen could appear in these spaces as part of winter celebration. Think of it as a community centerpiece, not a private one. Some records mention trees in guild settings, sometimes with sweets attached. Again, it is not one straight line from Eden play to modern tree. It is more like a braid of influences that slowly tightens. A public tree can inspire a private copy. A play image can become a household habit. And once a habit feels pleasant, it repeats. If you are still awake, we are simply following the tree as it moves indoors. Now let us talk about ornaments, because they begin as food. Early decorations often included apples, nuts, and small baked items. In some places, wafers were used, drawing on religious associations. In others, candies and sweet breads became the bright points on branches. Edible ornaments make practical sense. Winter treats are scarce, so hanging them turns them into visible promise. They also give children something to anticipate, and they create a small ceremony at the end. The tree is decorated, and later, it is harvested by the family. That harvest can be orderly or playful, but it links decoration with consumption, which is deeply human. There is also a quieter meaning in the foods chosen. Apples echo the Eden story for those who know it. Nuts and dried fruit speak of stored abundance. Wafers and breads hint at the sacred side of the season. Even when people are not thinking symbolically, the objects still speak. They are winter foods, placed where light catches them. Over time, ornament materials expanded. Paper became important because it is cheap and flexible. Paper chains, folded stars, and small cut shapes spread easily. These are household crafts, made during long evenings. The act of making becomes part of the ritual. Hands are busy, the room is calm, and conversation flows softly. In many families, the tree becomes a craft display as much as a shrine. Later, glass ornaments appear, especially associated with German production centers. Glass catches candlelight beautifully, and it looks magical without being loud. But glass also breaks, so it encourages careful handling. That carefulness is part of the tree's mood. Slow movements, gentle placement, and a quiet sense of arrangement. If you drifted, remember this simple point. Ornaments start as edible, then become handmade, then become manufactured. Now we move to a major turning point in Britain. Britain's tree moment is often linked to royal imagery and the illustrated press. There were earlier trees in Britain, especially in households with German connections. But what changes the scale is visibility. When the royal family is depicted with a decorated tree, the image travels. People do not have to see the tree in person. They see it in prints and later in newspapers and magazines. A single domestic scene becomes a model for thousands of homes. This is a theme we will see again later with Santa and with cards. Mass media turns private customs into public templates. In the British case, the tree becomes a domestic centerpiece. It is not mainly a church symbol. It is a family symbol displayed in the living room. It gathers gifts beneath it and faces toward the family circle. That shift matters. It moves the tree from public hall to private home, from shared town object to intimate ritual. And once a tree is in the home, it invites repetition every year. It also invites competition in a gentle form. Each year, families adjust the decorations, the height, the balance. The tree becomes a visual calendar you can look at. If you are still awake, we are now crossing the ocean. How does the tree become American? Part of the answer is immigration. German-speaking immigrants brought customs with them, including trees in some communities. But a custom brought by immigrants is not automatically national. It needs infrastructure, it needs markets, and it needs supply. As cities grow, households want consistent seasonal goods. Evergreens are abundant in parts of North America, but they still must be delivered. Tree lots begin to appear as seasonal businesses. Rail transport helps standardize what is possible. A tree can be cut in one region and sold in another. And the market encourages standard sizes that fit typical rooms. This is where the evergreen industry rises quietly. Farmers and landowners can treat Christmas trees as a crop. Plant, grow, harvest, and sell on a predictable winter schedule. You can feel the modern economy entering the tradition here. The tree becomes an item you can buy quickly. It is still meaningful, but it is also part of seasonal trade. Urban families with less access to forests now have a clear path to the tradition. Buy a tree, bring it home, decorate it, repeat next year. Different regions adopted the tree at different speeds. Some communities held on to other decorations longer. Some worried about waste or about religious appropriateness. But by the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the tree is increasingly familiar. It becomes part of the American Christmas picture. And because American media later travels widely, the picture spreads further. If you drifted, the short version is this. Immigration brings the idea. Markets make it common. Now we arrive at modern questions asked in a calm tone. Once you bring a tree indoors, you face practical decisions. The first is safety, especially around fire. Candlelit trees look beautiful, but they are risky. Historically, people managed risk with vigilance and with short burning times. Some used small holders, and some used sand or water nearby. Even so, accidents happened, and the risk was never imaginary. This is one reason electric lights become so important later. They reduce the need for open flame near dry needles. Electric strings also extend how long the tree can glow. But we will save most of that for the next section on light. The second modern question is real versus artificial. This topic can become heated in public debate, so we will keep it gentle. Both options have trade-offs, and the trade-offs depend on use over time. A real tree is renewable if grown responsibly, but it is cut and transported each year. An artificial tree avoids yearly cutting, but it is manufactured and often made from plastics and metals. Its impact depends on how long it is used, how it is made, and how it is disposed of. So the history here is not a verdict. It is the story of choice entering the tradition. In the early days, people used what was nearby. In modern life, many people choose what fits their space and values. Small apartments invite small trees or tabletop versions or wall-mounted shapes. Some people choose potted trees they can keep alive. Others choose artificial trees for convenience and allergy reasons. The core remains the same. A tall piece of green changes a room into a seasonal space. It offers scent, color, and a focal point for gathering. And it sets the stage for the next layer, almost automatically. Because once a tree stands indoors, it invites light. It invites tiny points of glow among the branches. And that is where we go next. Once a tree stands indoors, it invites the next tradition almost automatically. It invites light. Once a tree stands in a room, it almost asks for light. Winter traditions in general do the same. Light is practical, but it is also a feeling. It is the small proof that the night is manageable. Long before electric strings, people used flame as welcome and protection. A candle does two jobs at once. It helps you see, and it changes the mood of a room. In many Christian settings, candlelight became part of worship. Candlelit services concentrate attention gently. Faces soften in warm light, and voices blend more easily. In some churches, candles are lit one by one, slowly and deliberately. That pace matters. It turns lighting into a ritual, not just a necessity. You can see this in Advent and Christmas services across many regions. A candle can also symbolize presence. A light that stays lit says, "Someone is here." This idea moves out of churches and into windows. Window candles become a quiet signal in some traditions. They can suggest hospitality, like leaving the door unlocked in a safer world. They can also suggest remembrance, like keeping a place in the mind. In parts of Scandinavia and North America, a candle in the window feels familiar. It says there is warmth inside, even if the street is cold. It is not always religious. Sometimes it is simply neighborhood language. A row of window lights tells you the community is awake and gentle. If you are still awake, we are simply keeping the light low and steady. Now let us move to a different kind of light, the light of a fire. The Yule log is one of the most famous winter fire traditions, but it is not one single practice across Europe. It is one name for many local rules. In broad terms, it is a large log kept burning during a key night or season. It could be lit on Christmas Eve or on another winter feast day, depending on region. The idea is both practical and symbolic. A big log gives heat through long hours of darkness, and a long burning fire feels like protection against a long night. Some traditions include saving a piece of the log. That saved piece can be used to light the next year's fire. In folklore terms, this creates continuity, like carrying a spark through time. In practical terms, it can also be a way to ensure dry kindling. Either way, it becomes a rule that is easy to repeat. Do this, then keep this, then do it again next year. Over centuries, the Yule log idea travels and transforms. In some places, the real log fades as fireplaces change or disappear. Apartment life and modern heating make a giant log less practical, but the image stays, and the tradition becomes symbolic in new forms. One charming example is the Yule log dessert. In parts of France and elsewhere, a rolled cake is decorated like a log. It is a quiet way to keep the old fire image on the table. The fire becomes a sweet and the warmth becomes a taste. That is a pattern in holiday history. When technology changes, the symbol often survives as decoration or food. If you drifted, the calm summary is this: one log, many local rules, and sometimes it turns into a cake. Now we return to the tree, because the tree raises a practical problem. Dry needles and open flame do not always cooperate. Early trees were sometimes lit with candles clipped to branches. The effect is beautiful, but the risk is obvious, so people developed vigilance routines. Candles were lit for short periods, often while adults watched closely. Water might be kept nearby, and candles were blown out before sleep. Families treated it as an event, not background lighting. That is important. It was not an all-night glow. It was a small ceremony and then it ended. This helps explain why electric lights feel like such a turning point. Electrification changes winter light from an event into a habit. Once you can switch light on and off easily, it becomes part of daily rhythm. In the late 19th century, electric lighting spreads through cities and homes unevenly. Some households get it early, others much later. As it spreads, manufacturers begin to standardize sockets, plugs, and bulbs. Standardization matters more than it sounds. It reduces the number of improvised connections that can fail. It makes repairs easier, and it helps safety rules develop. Early electric strings could still be unreliable by modern standards, but they removed the most obvious danger, which is open flame near a tree. Gradually, lights become smaller, cooler, and more predictable. Insulation improves, wiring improves, and household expectations shift. People begin to expect a tree that can glow for long stretches. The tree becomes a background presence, not just a brief display. That change quietly reshapes the home at night. It creates a warm focal point that can last all season. If you are still awake, we are turning a page from hazard to habit. Now we widen our view to stars, lanterns, and outdoor displays. Not all holiday lights live indoors. In many places, lantern processions are part of winter culture. Children carry small lights through streets, moving like a slow constellation. Some lantern traditions connect to saint days in early December. Others are local school or neighborhood events that have grown over time. A lantern walk is gentle and communal. It lets people gather without loud noise or intense excitement. The star is another light symbol that travels well. In Christian stories, a star guides visitors to a birthplace. So stars become decorations that sit on trees, roofs, and in windows. They are easy to recognize, and they have a clear shape. Even when people treat them as simple decor, the guiding meaning lingers. In modern neighborhoods, outdoor lighting becomes a kind of community signaling. A house lit in warm color says, "We are participating." It is a public version of the window candle. You might not know your neighbors well, but you share the season visually. Some displays are quiet and minimal. Others are bright and elaborate depending on local style and personal taste. Either way, the lights turn streets into shared winter spaces. They soften darkness and make walking feel safer. This is one reason lights become such a strong modern symbol. They change the environment, not just the living room. Now let us ask the gentle brain question. Why does soft light feel mentally settling? Part of it is warmth cues. Warm, low light resembles firelight and sunset. Those are ancient signals that the active day is ending. They can encourage the nervous system to downshift. Another part is perceived safety. A lit space feels more controllable than a dark one. You can see faces, find objects, and relax the need to scan for danger. Soft light also narrows attention in a comforting way. It gives the eyes a gentle anchor. A small glow on a tree or a candle on a table becomes a resting place for focus. That is helpful when thoughts are busy. Instead of chasing every idea, the mind can sit beside a steady point of light. This is why people describe candles as calming, even when they are not thinking about symbols. It is an environment effect. And the environment is a quiet partner in how we feel. If you are still awake, we are simply moving from light to gifts. Because once warmth and glow are established, another winter currency appears. It is giving, visiting, and small exchanges that say, "You matter." With light established, we can follow the other winter currency. We can follow giving. If you're listening in bed, you can make tomorrow night easier. Add this video to watch later or download it for offline listening. That way, when you want the same calm again, you do not have to search. You can just press play and let your mind settle quickly. No urgency, no rush. Just a small favor for your future self. All right, now let's follow gifts from ancient winter feasts into modern living rooms. With light established, we can follow the other winter currency. It is giving, and it is also visiting. In older communities, gifts were not only for children. They were tools for relationships. A gift could say, "Thank you, I forgive you," or "I still belong here." This is why gift seasons existed long before modern Christmas dominated them. Many cultures placed gift giving near the new year. That timing makes sense. A new year is a reset, and resets invite gestures of repair. In the Roman world, for example, there were New Year customs of exchanging good luck tokens. Some were small, like sweets or branches, meant to carry an omen of abundance. The point was not luxury. The point was the social link, renewed at a hinge in time. Later European traditions also developed New Year giving patterns. In some places, landlords and tenants exchanged customary items. In others, employers offered small gifts to workers. Neighbors might bring food, and hosts returned hospitality. This is gift giving as social maintenance. It keeps the network warm in cold months. It also spreads resources without making it feel like charity. Sometimes gifts were about status and loyalty. A powerful person might give to show generosity and strengthen allegiance. A lower status person might give to show respect and secure goodwill. This can sound calculating, but it is also human. Communities need rituals that move value around in a stable way. Winter is when those rituals feel most necessary. If you are still awake, we are simply tracing how winter generosity finds a home in Christmas. Now we meet a figure who fits the season almost perfectly: Saint Nicholas. Historically, Nicholas was a bishop associated with Myra, in what is now part of modern Turkey. The details of his life are not all equally documented, but his reputation for charity grows large in Christian memory. Legendary stories attach to him like ornaments on a tree. One famous theme is secret giving. A gift appears without the giver being seen. That secrecy is powerful for a simple reason. It leaves the receiver feeling cared for without feeling indebted in the same way. The gift feels like pure help, not a public transaction. Stories often describe Nicholas helping families in distress quietly and at night. This matches winter needs. Winter hardship is real, and a secret benefactor is an ideal wish. The bishop figure also adds authority to generosity. He is not only kind, he is legitimate. In medieval and early modern Europe, Nicholas becomes linked to children and apprentices. Feast days and school traditions form around him. In some regions, he becomes a visitable figure, like a community performance. In others, he stays mostly in story and household ritual. Either way, Nicholas helps bridge charity and celebration. He makes generosity feel festive, not merely necessary. If you drifted, keep one calm point. Nicholas stories are memorable because they combine winter need with secret kindness. Now let us widen from individual gifts to public charity rituals. In many Christian contexts, the day after Christmas becomes important. It is associated with St. Stephen in Western tradition. It also becomes a time when households and institutions distribute alms. This is charity as a public habit, not just a private feeling. Communities organized giving through churches, guilds, and local authorities. The poor were not invisible in these rituals. They had an expected place in the seasonal flow. This is one way the season acted like mutual insurance. It created predictable moments when help was supposed to happen. Over time, in parts of Britain and the wider English-speaking world, a particular label appears: Boxing Day. In modern understanding, it is a public holiday with sports and shopping. Historically, it is often linked to boxes of gifts or money. These boxes could go to servants, apprentices, or those in need. It also reflects service relationships in large households. Servants worked through the main feast and then visited their own families after. The day after Christmas became a release day and a gift day, so the season included both celebration and redistribution. It is easy to miss this when we only picture private living rooms, but historically, a holiday is also a social system. It tells each role what to do: host, guest, worker, child, elder, stranger. It organizes visits and obligations in a predictable rhythm. If you are still awake, we are simply moving from charity to calendar shifts. Now we step into the Reformation era, where gift customs get rearranged. The Protestant Reformation changed many religious practices across Europe. In some regions, saint veneration was reduced or discouraged. That affected St. Nicholas traditions. But people still wanted winter generosity and children still wanted wonder. So some communities moved the gift day rather than removing it. Instead of gifts on Nicholas Day, gifts might shift to Christmas itself, or gifts might shift to Epiphany depending on local emphasis. A new gift bringer appears in some places. The Christkind, meaning the Christ child, becomes a figure of gift giving in parts of German-speaking Europe. This change is not uniform. Some areas kept Nicholas strongly. Others blended Nicholas with new figures or new dates. The point is not one correct tradition. The point is that gift giving is adaptable. People keep the function even when the theology changes. That function is winter generosity, made memorable for children. This helps explain why some regions keep Epiphany gifts today. If a culture centers January 6th, the gift day naturally sits there. If a culture centers December 25th, gifts follow the main feast. In some families, both exist, with small gifts early and larger gifts later. That creates a long season of anticipation. And anticipation is a powerful engine for tradition. If you drifted, here is the soft summary. Reformation shifts moved gift days and gift bringers, but the giving stayed. Now we arrive at modern gift culture with its own quiet rules. Today, gifts often come with lists. Lists can sound unromantic, but they solve a real problem. Modern households have many objects already, so the risk of mismatch is higher than it used to be. A list reduces waste and reduces stress. It is practical generosity, shaped by abundance. Modern gifts also come wrapped. Wrapping is not just decoration. It is a tool for slowing the reveal. In older times, the gift might be food or money or something visible. Wrapping creates a pause. It turns giving into a small ceremony. The receiver holds the object, hears paper move, and waits a moment longer. That waiting is a kind of sweetness. It is a controlled surprise, and it feels safe because the context is loving. You can think of it as a surprise contract. We agree to be surprised, but not harmed. We agree to act delighted because delight is part of the exchange. This is one reason holiday morning has a familiar choreography. Hands reach, paper rustles, smiles appear. It is predictable, and predictability is comforting. Retail also reshaped gift culture. Department stores made large selections visible in one place. They also created seasonal displays that guided desire. Wish lists become easier when you can point to a specific item. Later, catalogs and then online shopping extend this effect. The gift becomes linked to branding and availability. But the social meaning remains. I know you well enough to choose, or I listened well enough to ask. And the smallest, quietest form of this logic is a stocking stuffer, a small object wrapped in tradition more than paper, a hint of attention without a big performance. That is our open loop for the next section. We will zoom from big gifts to a tiny ritual. From big gifts, we zoom into the small, quiet ritual, a stocking, or sometimes just a shoe. Now we zoom in from big gifts to a small, quiet ritual. It is so small that it can fit in a shoe, or a sock, or a little bag by the hearth. This is one of the gentlest parts of the holiday, because it is predictable and it is contained. A tiny gift in a tiny container, waiting in the morning. Let us start with shoes by the fire. In many older European homes, the hearth was the social center. It was where heat lived, where food was cooked, and where people gathered. If you wanted a household ritual, the hearth was the natural stage. Shoes also belong there for practical reasons. Wet boots dry near warmth, and everyday footwear sits close to where you remove it. So placing a shoe near the hearth is an ordinary act. That ordinariness makes it perfect for a small miracle. Many shoe customs connect to saint days, especially St. Nicholas. In parts of the Low Countries, Germany, and surrounding regions, children place shoes out on a specific night. Sometimes hay or carrots are added for a horse, depending on the local story. In the morning, a small gift appears. The gift might be sweets, fruit, nuts, or a modest coin. The size matters. Small gifts are easier to give and easier to repeat yearly. They also avoid turning generosity into competition. A shoe is a natural limit, a built-in boundary. And boundaries help traditions stay calm. These customs vary by place and date. Some happen in early December. Some shift closer to Christmas or to Epiphany in different families. But the pattern stays recognizable. One object, one spot, one morning surprise. If you are still awake, we are simply watching a habit travel across borders. Now we meet the stocking. A stocking is just a piece of cloth shaped like a foot, but it becomes something more when it becomes a container. A container is a promise. It says something could be placed here, and it says there is a place for you in this story. Textiles are intimate household items. They are washed, repaired, and handled often. So when a sock becomes part of a ritual, it feels personal. In many English-speaking traditions, stockings are hung up rather than left on the floor. Sometimes they are hung by a fireplace. Sometimes they are hung on bedposts or along a mantle. The location varies, but the idea is the same. A soft vessel waits quietly through the night. The stocking tradition connects to older saint stories in popular retellings. One famous tale describes secret coins or gifts being dropped to help a family. Over time, storytellers place those gifts in a stocking or shoe left to dry. Whether or not the exact detail is historically provable, the logic fits. Drying textiles near a hearth is normal, so the story feels plausible, and plausibility helps stories stick. Across households, many substitutes exist. Boots, cloth bags, bowls, baskets, and small boxes can do the same job. The container is the true ritual object, not the exact material. In some places, children use slippers. In others, a basket sits under the tree. In others, a small bag hangs from a doorknob. The holiday adapts to the furniture people actually have. That is how traditions survive modernization. They keep the function and change the form. If you drifted, remember the calm core. A stocking is a container symbol, and many containers can stand in for it. Now we step upward into architecture and into chimneys. Chimneys are an elegant example of how homes shape folklore. In earlier centuries, many houses had large hearths and visible chimneys. The chimney was a real passage for smoke, ash, and sometimes drafts. It also became a passage in the imagination. Folklore loves liminal spaces. A threshold, a doorway, a window, a chimney. These are places where outside and inside meet. So they become natural entry points for magical visitors. As the Santa story develops in English-speaking culture, the chimney becomes central. It solves a storytelling problem. How does a gift bringer enter a locked house at night? A chimney offers an answer that feels both odd and familiar. It is part of the house, but it is not a door you use every day. It is hidden vertical and connected to the hearth below, so it links the visitor to the warm center of the home. That is emotionally satisfying. The visitor comes to the fire, the place where the family gathers, and the gifts appear near the same place. As home design changes, the image persists. Some modern homes have no working fireplace. Some apartments have no chimney at all. Still, stockings are hung, and the story continues. Sometimes the fireplace is decorative, and the chimney is purely imaginary. But the ritual remains, because it has become a shared picture. If you are still awake, we are simply noticing how pictures outlive plumbing. Now we come to the final step in this small rituals journey. How does a private household habit become a mass image? The answer is illustration and repetition. Once printing becomes cheap and widespread, artists fix scenes into standard forms. A fireplace, a mantle, stockings, a quiet night visitor. Children's books repeat it. Magazines repeat it. Advertisements repeat it. And soon, people feel that this is how it is supposed to look. Even families without fireplaces begin to imitate the image in creative ways. They hang stockings on shelves, on radiators, or on stair rails. The image becomes more powerful than the original architecture. This is also where the soothing power of small rituals becomes obvious. A stocking is predictable. It is the same spot each year and the same scale of surprise. Predictable surprise is comforting. It gives the brain a safe novelty inside a stable frame. The ritual is also quiet. It can happen without a party and without a crowd. That is why it travels so well. It fits almost any home. All you need is a container and a place to put it. Shoe, sock, bag, bowl, basket. One object, many countries. One gentle pattern, many names. And now, with gifts resting quietly by the hearth, we can listen for the next layer. It is the sound layer, carols, doorstep songs, and the surprisingly modern music industry behind them. Now we move from objects you can touch to something that fills the air. The sound layer of Christmas is music. It is the part of the holiday that can reach you with closed eyes, and it has a long history, from outdoor voices to quiet radio speakers. Let us begin with the word carol itself. Today we often imagine a carol as a church song, slow and reverent. But the older meaning is broader. A carol could be a song of joy, often meant for groups. In many medieval settings, carols were participatory. They were not concerts. They were something you joined, even if your voice was ordinary. Some early carols were linked to dance as well as singing. The feeling was communal rather than performative. This matters because it tells us what the music was for. It was for belonging. It was for marking a season together. And it could happen indoors or outdoors, not only in church. Later, churches did gather and shape carol traditions strongly, but the roots are mixed with folk habits and religious calendars braided together. If you are still awake, We are simply listening to the word before we listen to the songs. Now we step outside to the doorstep traditions. In parts of England and neighboring regions, winter singing included a practice called wassailing. The word is often connected to an old greeting meaning good health. Wassailing could be about visiting houses. Singers would offer blessings, songs, and good wishes. In return, they might receive food, drink, or coins. This is not just entertainment. It is a social exchange, like gift giving with melodies instead of wrapping paper. There was often a shared bowl involved, filled with a warm spiced drink. Passing the bowl reinforces the idea of community. You drink from the same source, so you are part of the same winter circle. Wassailing could also extend beyond houses to orchards. In orchard wassailing, people sang to fruit trees. They made noise, offered drink, and asked for a good harvest. On one level, this is symbolic agriculture. On another level, it is community morale. It gives people something to do in the deep, dark months. It also connects winter to the future spring, which is comforting. Doorstep singing traditions vary widely. Some regions treat them as formal house visiting rounds. Others treat them as informal neighborhood singing. Sometimes the mood is gentle. Sometimes it is rowdy, depending on place and era. But the core idea repeats. You walk, you sing, you exchange good wishes, and you share a little warmth. If you drifted, the calm point is this. Carols were often social visits, not stage performances. Now we move from wandering voices to printed pages. Print changes carols in a quiet but powerful way. Before cheap printing, songs move by memory. Memory changes details and versions multiply. That can be beautiful, but it makes a stable repertoire harder to keep. As printing becomes cheaper, editors and church musicians compile collections. Some collections aim to recover older melodies. Others aim to create new carols in a familiar style. In the 18th and 19th centuries, hymn revivals and church reforms also play a role. Many Protestant communities emphasize congregational singing. Choirs expand and musical education becomes more organized. When churches encourage singing, they also encourage shared songbooks. A songbook does something simple. It freezes aversion. It gives a community the same words and the same tune pattern. Now a carol can travel far without changing much. You can sing the same song in different towns and still recognize it. This stability helps carols become seasonal markers. A tune heard in December becomes a shortcut to the season. One reason Christmas music feels instantly recognizable today is that printing helped standardize it. If you are still awake, we are turning a page from memory to paper. Now we step into Victorian carols, which reshape the soundscape. The Victorian era is a major turning point for modern Christmas in general. It emphasizes domestic warmth, family feeling, and childhood as a moral ideal. Music follows that shift. Carols become strongly associated with family gatherings and school events. Child voices become a sonic symbol of the season. There is a reason so many holiday scenes include children singing. Victorian culture often treats childhood as innocent and instructive. A child singing becomes a symbol of purity and home life. Schools and churches reinforce this by organizing seasonal singing. One widely known format is lessons and carols. It combines readings with music, moving through a narrative arc. This structure is calming because it alternates voice and song in predictable steps. It also allows old and new carols to sit together. In Victorian Britain and beyond, caroling becomes an organized practice. Groups visit homes, sometimes for charity, sometimes for fellowship. The image of singers in winter coats at a doorway becomes familiar. And familiar images are what traditions are made of. If you drifted, here is the soft summary. The Victorian era helped link carols to family, children, and organize seasonal events. Now we move into recorded sound and everything loops. Recorded music changes Christmas in the way printing did, but even more strongly. Once a song is on a record, it can be replayed exactly. That replayability creates a new habit. Instead of singing, you can listen. Instead of one performance, you can have a perfect repetition. Radio then amplifies the effect. A broadcast can carry the same carols to millions at once. This is how a limited set of songs becomes a shared seasonal soundtrack. You might hear the same few melodies in shops, offices, and homes. Later, tapes and compact discs continue the loop, and now playlists do the same job with even less effort. With one button, you can enter the season's sound world. This can be soothing. Repetition reduces uncertainty and creates a stable mood. A familiar carol can feel like a warm blanket for the ears. But repetition can also become tiring if it feels forced. When a song follows you everywhere, it stops feeling like choice. So the same loop that calms one person can irritate another. That difference is normal. It depends on context, personal history, and how much control you have over the sound. In a bedroom at night, a gentle carol can be comforting. In a crowded store, the same carol can feel like pressure. The technology is neutral, but the environment changes the experience. If you are still awake, we are simply moving from songs to mail. Because once music travels by print and radio, another quiet technology spreads holiday feeling. It is the humble letter and the holiday card. With music in place, we can look at the quiet technology that spread Christmas feelings at scale. We can look at the mail. Now we move from songs in the air to paper in the hand. Christmas cards are a quiet technology. They let you visit someone without traveling. They let you say, "I remember you," in a form that can cross miles. But cards do not become common until the mail becomes reliable. So the story begins with a postal revolution. In the early modern world, letters existed, of course. But sending a message could be slow, costly, and uncertain. As postal systems modernized in the 19th century, things changed. Routes became more regular. Delivery became more dependable. And, importantly, postage became cheaper and easier to understand. When the cost of sending a note drops, a new habit appears. Sending a thought becomes normal. And once it is normal, it becomes socially expected. This is how polite society works. A small action becomes a sign of care, then a sign of proper behavior. If you are still awake, we are simply watching a new routine form. Cheap postage and reliable delivery turn the calendar into a communication season. December becomes a time when the post is busy. People send greetings because everyone else is sending greetings. This can sound circular, but it is how traditions scale. A network effect creates a holiday habit. Now we step into early commercial cards and printing. Before printed cards, people could write letters or notes by hand. Some could draw small scenes or use decorative stationery, but mass cards require printing technology and distribution. One often cited milestone is an English commercial Christmas card from the year 1843. It is frequently described as an early, widely documented example, not the only possible first of its kind. That distinction matters. History often has many early experiments, but only a few that become famous and traceable. The 1843 card is linked to the idea of selling printed greetings for the season. Once someone demonstrates a market, the market grows. Printing makes it cheaper to repeat the same design many times. It also makes the message look polished, even if the sender writes only a name. As printing improves, so does color. Lithography, and later other printing methods, make colorful designs practical. Color matters for winter imagery. A bit of red and green stands out on a gray day. A snowy scene looks crisp on a white card. So cards become not just messages, but small seasonal pictures. A little portable winter delivered to a doorstep. If you drifted, the calm summary is this: better mail plus better printing equals the Christmas card. Now we ask why certain motifs took over. When you think of classic cards, a few symbols appear repeatedly. Holly with red berries, snow scenes, bells, candles. And in Britain, especially, the robin. The robin detail can feel odd at first. but it makes sense when you remember how symbols work. A robin is easy to recognize at a glance. It is bright against winter backgrounds, and it had cultural associations with winter charity and postmen in Victorian imagery. Whether or not every sender thought about that, the image stuck. Snow scenes are also simple to read quickly. Even if you live somewhere without snow, snow reads as winter in visual language. Bells read as celebration and gathering. Candles read as warmth, welcome, and nightlight. Holly reads as evergreen endurance, already familiar from decoration. These symbols are legible. They do not require a story explanation. A card is glanced at, not studied, so the best card images are immediate and calm. They communicate season, not argument. Printing also encourages repetition. Once a design style sells, publishers reproduce it. That repetition trains the public eye. Soon, the motifs feel traditional, even if they are relatively new. This is how a modern visual vocabulary forms. It is not designed by one person. It is assembled by thousands of small choices in shops and homes. If you are still awake, we are simply noticing how pictures become defaults. Now we come to the social side of cards, which is quietly complicated. Cards become a form of social accounting, not in a cold way, but in a network way. They track relationships. Who did I think of this year? Who thought of me? In some households, cards are displayed openly, on a mantle, a shelf, or a string across a room. This turns private messages into a communal picture of connection. A wall of cards says, "We have ties." It can feel comforting, especially in winter, but it can also create gentle pressure. If many cards arrive, you may feel you should send many. That expectation is part of how the tradition keeps going. Etiquette grows around it. When do you send them? How early is too early? Who gets a card with a longer handwritten note? Who gets a simple signature? These rules vary by culture and class. But the existence of rules is the point. They make the practice predictable. Predictability is what sleepy minds often like. Cards also connect to charity in interesting ways. Charity cards allow someone to signal communal identity. You send a card, and part of the purchase supports a cause. The card becomes both greeting and small donation. In some communities, buying certain cards becomes a seasonal norm. Again, social habits scale through repeated small actions. And the card itself is a quiet object. It does not demand response in the way a phone call might. It sits patiently until the receiver has time. That patience is part of its charm. In our own era, digital messages can move instantly, yet many people still like physical cards. Because paper feels like effort. It proves someone took a moment, chose a design, wrote your name, and sent it. That is the whole magic. Not the ink, but the attention. If you drifted, keep this soft ending. Christmas cards are mail-made emotional at mass scale through printing and etiquette. And from paper greetings, we return to a core religious image that also became a universal decoration. We return to the Nativity. From paper greetings, we return to a core sacred image. It is the nativity scene. Even in homes that are not religious, the nativity can appear as a quiet symbol. A stable, a star, a small cluster of figures. It is simple enough to be universal and detailed enough to invite variations. To understand those variations, we begin with sources. The nativity story is not told in one single identical way. Different parts of the New Testament emphasize different details. The Gospel of Luke includes shepherds and a manger scene. The Gospel of Matthew includes visitors often called magi, guided by a star. Matthew does not describe shepherds at the manger. Luke does not describe a magi arriving with gifts. Later tradition often combines these strands into one continuous scene. That blending is natural. Communities prefer a complete picture to a split set of episodes. But it also explains why details vary across nativities. Some scenes emphasize shepherds and angels. Some emphasize kings and camels. Some place everyone together on the same night. Others separate them by days, as the texts suggest might be more accurate. This is a gentle example of how tradition fills in gaps. People ask questions. Was there an ox? Was there a donkey? How many visitors came? The texts do not always answer with numbers or lists, so later art and storytelling supply familiar shapes. Animals appear because a stable suggests animals. A star appears because the story language invites one. A trio of kings appears because gifts are 3 in the story of Matthew. The names of the kings are later additions, not part of the earliest text. And their number is an inference, not a direct statement in Scripture. None of this is a scandal. It is simply how human storytelling works. Text gives a frame, and tradition paints the scene. If you are still awake, we are calmly separating text from tradition, without arguing. Now we step into medieval devotion and visual teaching. One name often appears in this part of the history: Francis of Assisi. A tradition widely repeated says that in the year 1223, at Greccio in Italy, Francis organized a living nativity. The details vary in retelling, but the idea is clear. Instead of only reading or preaching the story, people staged it. A manger, animals, people gathered in a small outdoor setting. This kind of scene is powerful in a mostly non-literate society. When many people cannot read books, images teach. A tableau fixes a story in memory. It also makes the sacred feel close. You do not only hear about a birth in a distant land, you see a humble setting in your own landscape. That closeness helps devotion, and it also builds community. Everyone participates by watching, singing, or playing a role. In this sense, a nativity is like a carol. It is not only performance, it is shared participation. Over time, churches develop more formal nativity displays. Crèches, meaning manger scenes, become part of seasonal decoration. Some are elaborate, with many figures and buildings. Some are spare, with only a few essential characters. The point is not artistic perfection. The point is the story made visible. If you drifted, keep one calm detail. Visual storytelling spreads easily when reading is limited, so scenes become teachers. Now we move from church settings into homes. Tabletop crèches are a fascinating blend of devotion and decoration. They turn a religious story into a household object. That can sound ordinary, but it is a major shift. It means sacred time has a place on the family table. In some regions, setting up the figures is a yearly ritual. The pieces come out of a box the same way ornaments do. They are placed slowly with care, sometimes by children. Placement rules can form. Who puts out the animals first? When does the infant figure appear? In some families, the infant is placed only on Christmas Day. In others, the scene is complete from the start. The Magi may arrive later, on Epiphany. That staged arrival can mirror the calendar we discussed earlier. It makes time visible. A scene changes slowly, like a small indoor play. Craft traditions also shape what nativities look like. In Provence, for example, there are famous local figurines, often called santons. These can include not only biblical figures, but local village types. A baker, a shepherd, a fisherman, a woman carrying water. This is another way tradition works. It inserts local life into the sacred story, gently and respectfully. It says our village also stands near this manger in imagination. In other regions, materials change the style. Wood carving, clay, straw, fabric, paper, even glass. Each medium creates a different mood. A rough carved set feels humble. A porcelain set feels delicate. A hand-sewn set feels warm and domestic. So nativities become not only religious symbols, but craft heritage. They are passed down, repaired, and cherished. If you are still awake, we are simply watching a story become an object, and an object become a family ritual. Now we step back into public space, where things get more complex. Modern public nativities appear in town squares, churches, and sometimes government spaces. In some places, they are seen as cultural heritage, not only religion. In others, they spark debate about public display and plural communities. Here we can hold two truths quietly. For many people, a nativity is a meaningful expression of faith and tradition. And for many communities, public space belongs to many traditions at once. So, approaches vary. Some places include multiple seasonal displays side by side. Some move nativities to church grounds rather than civic lawns. Some create inclusive holiday villages with many cultural elements. In modern cities, you may also see blended depictions, a nativity rendered in local clothing styles or with diverse artistic interpretations. This can be a way communities say, "This story reached us too." It is also a reminder that the nativity has always adapted through art. From medieval plays to clay figures, adaptation is the norm. We can also place a gentle open loop here. In many regions, sacred scenes sit beside folklore, a nativity in one corner and a local winter companion story nearby. We will meet those companions later. For now, let the nativity rest as a quiet center, a stable scene that can hold both text and tradition. And now we reach the figure that travels through nearly every other tradition. We reach Santa and his many relatives. Now we meet the figure who seems to touch almost every Christmas custom. Santa feels like one person. But historically, he is more like a family tree. Different branches grow in different regions, then intertwine. If you hold the family tree idea gently, the story becomes easier. Sinterklaas is not a mistake. Father Christmas is not a contradiction. Christkind is not an enemy. They are branches that sometimes merge and sometimes stay separate. Let us begin with the oldest strong branch in the story, Saint Nicholas. Nicholas is remembered as a bishop, and bishop imagery matters. In art, a bishop is often shown with a tall hat, called a mitre. He may carry a staff and wear long robes. Those details become part of later winter costumes. They also signal authority, not only friendliness. Nicholas traditions often carry a moral shape. Children are rewarded for good behavior and corrected for bad behavior. That theme is not unique to Nicholas, but it fits him well. He becomes a seasonal judge and helper at the same time. His feast day is in early December in the Western calendar, so Nicholas customs often occur before Christmas. That is one reason gift giving is not always centered on December 25th. In some communities, Nicholas visits on the night before his feast day. Children place shoes out, and small gifts appear by morning. The gifts are usually modest: fruit, nuts, sweets, and small coins. Again, the scale keeps the tradition calm and repeatable. Nicholas stories also emphasize charity. He gives secretly. He helps the vulnerable. He brings relief without spectacle. Those themes match winter needs very well. A cold season creates a hunger for stories of provision. So Nicholas becomes a template. He is a generosity machine in narrative form. If you drifted, the first branch is simple. Saint Nicholas is the saint behind the generosity template. Now we move to the Low Countries, where a very specific version blossoms: Sinterklaas. Sinterklaas is the Dutch form of Saint Nicholas, but he develops local personality. He is often imagined as arriving from across the sea. He has a formal public arrival in many modern celebrations. He is greeted by crowds, songs, and rituals that feel like a civic festival. Children may write letters, draw pictures, or leave notes. Shoes by the fireplace appear again because the container ritual travels well. In some versions, carrots or hay are offered for his horse. In others, it is a symbolic gesture like feeding the story itself. The night of gifts is often early December, not late December. So the calendar remains distinct from Christmas Day in many Dutch households. This is important for our family tree. Sinterklaas is still his own branch in many places. He does not need to become Santa to make sense. Now we add the ocean crossing. Dutch settlers and communities carry elements of Sinterklaas with them to North America. Names shift in English mouths over time. Sinterklaas becomes Santa Claus as the sound adapts. But the adaptation is not immediate or complete. It is gradual, influenced by local culture and print. The core idea of a night visitor who brings gifts stays strong. The details continue to evolve. If you are still awake, we are simply letting one regional character travel and change slightly. Now we step to England, where another branch looks quite different. Father Christmas. Father Christmas begins less as a saint and more as a personification. He is the spirit of feasting, good cheer, and winter abundance. Think of him as Christmas itself, given a human coat and voice. In older English imagery, Father Christmas may not focus on children at all. He can represent adult celebration, hospitality, and the table. He fits the world of big meals, warm drinks, and social gatherings. Over time, especially as gift culture shifts toward family and childhood, roles begin to merge. A society that wants one main winter figure starts combining traits. The feasting spirit begins to borrow the gift-bringer job. This is not a sudden takeover. It is a long blending, helped by literature, theater, and later illustration. By the 19th century, English Christmas culture is changing rapidly. The holiday is becoming more domestic, more centered on home life. So Father Christmas becomes softer, more paternal, more family-oriented. And as American Santa imagery grows powerful later, it feeds back into Britain. So the English branch and the American branch cross-pollinate. If you drifted, keep the calm contrast. Father Christmas starts as the spirit of feasting, then gradually picks up gift roles. Now we move to a branch shaped strongly by the Reformation, the Christkind. In some Protestant regions, reformers discouraged saint-centered customs. That included St. Nicholas in certain places, but the hunger for a gift bringer remained. So some communities re-centered the story on the Christ child. Christkind means Christ child, and it becomes a gift-bringing figure in parts of German-speaking Europe. This shift also affects dates. Instead of gifts on Nicholas Day, gifts might move to Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. In many German traditions, Christmas Eve becomes the main moment of exchange. That matches the idea of a holy night and a sacred arrival. The story changes tone as well. A bishop visitor becomes a more angelic or childlike presence. Sometimes Christkind is imagined as unseen, like a pure spirit. Sometimes it is represented in pageants by a girl in white. Again, this varies by region and era. The important point is the function. A community needs a narrative reason for gifts. Theology changes the costume and the timing, but not the need. And in places where Epiphany remains central, gifts can still cluster on January 6th. So the family tree is also a calendar tree. Different branches bloom on different days. If you are still awake, we are simply naming the branches and the days. Now we come to a famous poem that acts like a strong graft onto the tree. A Visit from St. Nicholas. Many people know it by its opening line about a night before Christmas. It is often dated to the early 19th century in the United States. This poem does something powerful. It supplies a detailed domestic scene that can be copied endlessly. A visitor arrives at night. He travels by sleigh. He has reindeer. He enters and leaves quickly. He fills stockings. He is jolly, compact, and surprisingly specific in his mannerisms. These details sink into popular memory because they are concrete. Once a story has concrete props, it becomes easy to illustrate. And once it is illustrated, it becomes hard to unsee. The poem also ties the gift bringer to December 24th night into December 25th morning. That anchors Santa to the main Christmas date in American culture. Now, there is a calm historical footnote here. The poem's authorship has been debated over time. You will sometimes hear one name and sometimes another. What matters for sleepy listening is not the argument, but the shape of evidence. Some attribution rests on early publication history. Some rests on later family claims. Scholars have compared vocabulary and style to other writings. The debate exists, but the poem's influence does not depend on a final verdict. The cultural effect is clear, even if the signature is contested, so we can hold that uncertainty gently. We know the poem becomes famous and widely reprinted. We know it supplies many of the reindeer and sleigh details people now assume are ancient. And we know those details spread through print. If you drifted, remember this simple point. A single poem helped standardize Santa's night ride and his reindeer team. Now we move from words to images, because images do the final locking in. Illustration is the tool that turns a story into a shared face. 19th century artists repeatedly draw a gift bringer in winter clothing. Over time, certain traits become stable. A fur-trimmed coat, a cap, a rounder face, a bag of gifts, a cheerful, brisk demeanor. In the United States, artists like Thomas Nast are often mentioned in this story. They published recurring Santa imagery in widely read magazines. That repetition matters more than any one drawing. A character becomes real when you see him every year. Illustrations also create narrative machinery. Where does Santa live? The North Pole becomes a convenient answer. Distant and magical. How does he manage so many gifts? A workshop becomes a convenient answer with helpers and systems. How does he choose who gets what? A list becomes a convenient answer, turning morality into paperwork. These are story tools. They make the character scalable, like turning one visitor into a global delivery service. Once the machinery exists, later media can build on it easily. Films, advertisements, store displays, and children's books inherit the same parts. They might change tone, but they keep the recognizable skeleton. The family tree starts to look like one trunk in the public imagination, but the branches still exist beneath the surface. In many households, St. Nicholas still visits separately. In others, Christkind still brings gifts. In others, Father Christmas keeps his older feasting spirit even when dressed like Santa. So when you see Santa, you are often seeing a blend. A saint's charity, a Dutch visitor's name, an English feast spirit's warmth, a Protestant shift toward the Christ child, a poem's sleigh ride, an illustrator's recurring face. If you are still awake, here is the micro recap. Nicholas is the root. Sinterklaas is a regional branch. Father Christmas is a personification, and Christkind is a Reformation-era branch. Then poems and pictures braid them into modern Santa. With the character assembled, we can watch what happens next. The modern era exports him around the world, sometimes gently through films and music, sometimes forcefully through retail and advertising. That is our next chapter. Now that the character is assembled, we can watch him travel. This chapter is about scale. How does one winter visitor become a global default image? The answer is a trio of forces: retail spaces, mass media, and local adaptation. Let us begin with department stores, because they invent a new public ritual. A home visitor becomes a public figure you can meet in daylight. Large stores in growing cities needed seasonal events. They wanted crowds, but they also needed those crowds to feel safe and happy. A friendly Santa meets that need perfectly. He is welcoming, predictable, and built for repeated encounters. So the department store Santa becomes a scheduled experience. Children line up. Parents take photos or later buy photos. Letters are dictated or whispered. A small conversation happens in a controlled space. This is a modern twist on older visiting traditions. Instead of singers at the door, you visit the figure in a public hall. Instead of a gift appearing mysteriously, a promise is made. The promise is emotional more than material. You met the story, and the story noticed you. Stores also make the visit easy to repeat. A set, a costume, a chair, and a seasonal staff schedule. In this setting, Santa becomes a service role. A performer learns a script and repeats it gently all day. That repetition is part of the ritual's success. Children do not need novelty. They need the feeling of being safely seen. And parents need a clear plan for the season. A scheduled Santa visit turns wonder into an appointment. If you are still awake, we are simply noticing how crowds create new traditions. Now we move to advertising, where images harden into defaults. Advertising does not invent Santa from nothing, but it can choose which version becomes most familiar. Repeated illustration produces a default image by sheer frequency. Even if you know Santa has many ancestors, the billboard shows one face. That face tends to be friendly, rounded, and approachable. Why? Because a welcoming character sells comfort. Soft shapes communicate safety. Warm fabrics communicate warmth. An open posture invites trust. Advertising artists learn these visual cues and then reuse them. A fur-trimmed coat, a bright cap, rosy cheeks, a gentle smile. Even if the style changes over decades, the emotional message stays stable. Santa becomes a mascot for seasonal warmth. This is a shift from saintly authority to friendly familiarity. A bishop can correct you. A friendly Santa can charm you. In consumer settings, charm works better. This is not necessarily sinister. It is simply how public imagery evolves under commercial incentives. Once the image is standardized, it spreads easily across languages. You do not need to read a caption to recognize the character. A red coat and a white beard do most of the work. If you drifted, keep the soft point. Advertising makes one version of Santa feel like the default by repeating it. Now we add film, radio, and later television. These media do not only show Santa, they teach you how Santa sounds. Accent, phrasing, and rhythm become cues. A deep, warm voice, slow, hearty laughter. A kindly way of saying a child's name. Even when different actors play him, certain patterns repeat. That repetition becomes a shared script across regions. When people in different towns hear the same kind of Santa voice, the character feels more real. Radio is especially powerful here because it enters homes quietly. It can play while people cook, decorate, or wrap gifts. Television later adds visuals that match the audio. Now, Santa is not only an illustration. He is a moving person who speaks and gestures. This is how small details become assumed truths. The North Pole becomes a common location. The workshop becomes expected. Reindeer become standard. Lists become part of the story's machinery. Media also compresses regional diversity. A film made in one country can be watched elsewhere with little change. So one version of Santa can travel faster than older customs ever could. If you are still awake, we are turning a page from stores to screens. Now we come to the calm reality in most households: coexistence. Santa often arrives alongside older gift bringers rather than replacing them completely. In many Spanish traditions, the three kings remain central on January 6th. In parts of Germany and Austria, Christkind still brings gifts on Christmas Eve. In Russia and some neighboring cultures, Dead Moroz, Grandfather Frost, is a major winter figure. In parts of Europe, St. Nicholas remains a separate early December visitor. In other places, local saints and regional figures keep their own nights. Families do not always choose one and discard the rest. They blend calendars. A child might receive a small gift on St. Nicholas Day, then a family meal and gifts on Christmas Eve, then a final celebration at Epiphany. Or a family might celebrate Santa at school and media level while keeping an older gift day at home. This blending is not confusing to children as much as adults assume. Children learn patterns quickly. They notice which day belongs to which story in their household. And the household story is the one that feels real. Blending also reduces conflict. A culture can adopt some Santa imagery without surrendering local identity. A city can have a Santa parade and still hold an Epiphany parade. A family can enjoy holiday films and still play shoes for a saint. This is how traditions survive globalization. They become layered rather than erased. If you drifted, here is the micro recap. Santa spreads fast, but older gift bringers often remain beside him. Now we place a small teaser on our myth list for later. You have probably heard the claim that one soda company invented Santa. This story persists because simple origin stories are satisfying. They let a complicated history collapse into one neat sentence. The truth is usually calmer. Santa's image develops over many decades through many artists and customs. Advertising can amplify and popularize a look, but it rarely invents a whole figure alone. We will fact-check this gently near the end of the video. For now, just keep the myth on a shelf, like a labeled jar. We are not opening it yet. If you are still awake, we are simply collecting myths for a later, sleepy cleanup. With Santa now traveling through stores, screens, and family calendars, the season gains extra characters. Winter folklore loves companions and counterfigures. Some are playful, some are stern, and some are strange. And they often live beside the gift bringer, not instead of him. Now, let's meet the companions and counterfigures that winter folklore adds around the gift bringer. Now that Santa has traveled widely, we can meet his neighbors. Winter folklore multiplies characters in a way that feels almost natural. When nights are long, stories have more room to grow. Darkness is story space. It hides details, and it invites imagination to fill them in. Winter is also a season of rules. You share limited warmth, limited food, and limited daylight. So communities build customs that encourage cooperation. Folklore companions often do that work. They reward good behavior, warn against harm, and keep children attentive to social expectations. This is not only about fear. It is about structure. A character can carry a rule without a lecture. Instead of saying, "Be kind," a story shows what kindness brings. Instead of saying, "Do not steal," a story builds a playful consequence. Many winter companions also arrive on specific nights. That timing matters. A calendar gives the imagination a schedule. And schedules are soothing, even when the characters are odd. If you are still awake, we are simply meeting these figures in a calm, museum-like way. Now we step into the Alpine world, where one companion has become famous: Krampus. In many retellings, Krampus is paired with St. Nicholas. Nicholas rewards, the companion warns. This pairing is a simple narrative balance. A soft hand and a firm hand traveling together. In some regions, the companion is described as shaggy or animal-like. The imagery can look intense in modern photos, but the social function is familiar. It is the same logic as many moral tales, just with a winter costume. Modern Krampus parades, sometimes called runs, have grown in visibility. Some communities describe them as long-standing local traditions. Others have revived and reshaped them in recent decades. Tourism and media attention have also amplified them. So what you see today is often a blend. Local heritage, revival energy, and public performance. Costumes may be crafted with great artistry. Masks can be elaborate, bells loud, and processions dramatic. But in our gentle telling, we do not need the loudness. We can focus on the structure. A public parade allows a community to act out winter tension safely. It places the wildness on the street for a controlled time. Then it ends, and ordinary life returns. This is a common pattern in seasonal festivals worldwide. A brief inversion, then a return to order. If you drifted, here is the calm point. Krampus is one well-known companion, but modern parades are also shaped by revival and tourism. Now we move across German-speaking regions and nearby areas where several companions appear. Some names change by valley and by town. One name you may hear is Ruprecht, another is Belsnickel, another is Perchta. These figures can overlap in the public imagination, but they are not identical everywhere. That is part of the fascination. Folklore is local, like dialect. A region's companion can become another region's rumor. People hear a story from a neighbor village and retell it with new details. Over generations, the story shifts like a melody passed by ear. Ruprecht is often associated with a helper role around Nicholas time in parts of Germany. In some accounts, he carries a sack or asks children questions. He can be stern, but he is also a ritual device. He makes the visit feel like a test, which makes behavior feel meaningful. Belsnickel appears in parts of southwestern Germany and related areas, and later in immigrant communities. He is often described as a rougher, more rustic visitor. Sometimes he gives sweets. Sometimes he threatens light punishment in story form. The mixture of reward and warning is the key pattern again. In immigrant settings, Belsnickel can persist even when other customs fade. A family might keep the name and the visit long after leaving the original region. That is how folklore travels. Perchta, in many descriptions, is linked to the 12 days or to Epiphany time in Alpine and nearby traditions. She is sometimes imagined as a household inspector figure. She is connected to spinning, domestic work, or seasonal cleanliness in some local stories. These themes make sense in winter, when indoor labor and order matter. Again, we do not need to dwell on the frightening versions. We can describe the role clinically. A character who checks whether the household kept its seasonal rules. It is folklore as a social checklist. If you are still awake, we are simply grouping these companions as local rule carriers. Now we travel far north and west to Iceland, where the pattern becomes delightfully organized. The Yule lads. Instead of one companion, there are many. Often counted as 13 in modern tradition, they arrive one by one in the nights before Christmas. Each has a mischievous personality, often tied to household habits. One might steal food, another might slam doors, another might hide or take small objects. The specifics vary, but the calendar structure is remarkably satisfying. One visitor per night. That is the kind of list the human mind loves. Lists turn chaos into sequence. They give you a sense of progress. Night by night, you know where you are. Children can track the season like stepping stones across a stream. This also softens the mischief. One small troublemaker at a time is easier than one huge monster. In many modern Icelandic practices, children put a shoe in the window. They receive a small gift, or sometimes a potato, depending on behavior and storytelling tone. Notice how the shoe ritual reappears here too, adapted to local characters. Folklore reuses good containers. In Iceland, the Yule lads are also connected to a larger family in some stories. They can have a mother figure and a household setting in the mountains. But again, the key is structure, not terror. A calendar of visitors that makes December feel alive. If you drifted, keep the gentle summary. The Yule lads are a list of nightly visitors, and the list itself is part of the charm. Now we move to Italy, where another gift giver arrives on a different date. La Befana. La Befana is associated with Epiphany time around January 6th. She is often described as an older woman figure who brings gifts or treats. In many tellings, she travels at night, sometimes by broom, sometimes simply as a visitor. Her story connects loosely to the Magi in popular tradition. The Magi are searching, and she either helps, refuses, or later regrets and joins in gifting. Different regions tell it differently, but the social function is clear. She provides a gift story tied to the January calendar. This allows families to keep a long season with a late climax. And her character is not the same as Santa. She feels older, more domestic, more like a village figure than a global mascot. That difference is precisely why she survives beside Santa in many households. Now we add a doorway tradition from Wales, because winter folklore loves thresholds. Mari Lwyd. In some Welsh traditions, Mari Lwyd involves a house visiting ritual with songs or rhymed exchanges. A visiting group arrives and a verbal contest happens at the door. The doorway becomes a stage, like it did with caroling and wassailing. It is a social test and a social game. The household and the visitors trade lines until entry is granted, and then hospitality follows. Again, the form can vary and modern practice can involve revival and local festivals. But the core idea is familiar. Winter creates visiting rituals, and visiting rituals create songs. If you are still awake, we are simply noticing how many customs begin at the door. Now, a calm note about scary stories. Some winter companions can be described in frightening ways. That does not mean the tradition is meant to traumatize. Often, it is a controlled kind of spookiness, contained by costume and schedule, like telling a ghost story with friends, then turning on the lights. Still, for sleep-friendly listening, we keep the tone clinical and brief. We name the figure, describe the function, and move on. No lingering images, no dramatic details. Just folklore as cultural history. And if any part feels too sharp, you can let it pass like a cloud. Next, we travel by region, gently and slowly. Because the same holiday looks very different depending on where you stand. If you're still with me, imagine unfolding a map. We are about to step into a regional Christmas atlas. If you're awake enough for one tiny action, leave a one-word comment. Just say tree, or carols, or Santa. No sentence needed. It helps me see which tradition you want next, without any fuss. And if you're drifting off, you can ignore this completely. All right. Now, let's tour the winter holiday region by region, starting in Northern and Western Europe. Now imagine unfolding a map on a quiet table. We are going to travel region by region, gently and slowly. To keep it soothing, we will use the same small template each time. We will notice the date rhythm, the food rhythm, the main figure, and the sound. Date, food, figure, music. And we will let each place keep its own pace. We begin in the British Isles, where Christmas often centers on domestic warmth. The calendar emphasis is usually strong on December 25th, with an important day after as well. Many households treat Christmas Day as the main family gathering, and the days around it become a small, protected bubble. Food plays a big role in the British script. There is a sense of a set table and a familiar sequence. Roasts, rich sides, and desserts that feel heavier than ordinary days. Puddings, in particular, carry a long history of ritual preparation and serving. They can be made ahead, stored, and then brought out as a seasonal certainty. Another object that became a British staple is the Christmas cracker. It turns a meal into a small moment of theater, a pop, a paper crown, a tiny gift, and a joke. It is a predictable surprise, which is exactly the kind of surprise that feels safe. Music in the British Isles often includes organized carol services. Some are religious, some are civic, and many are charity-linked. The tradition of lessons and carols became a recognizable seasonal format. You hear readings, then songs, alternating like a calm pattern. Public singing also appears through street collections and community choirs. So the British sound layer often feels shared, not only private. If you are still awake, we are simply moving one step east on the map. Now we arrive in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, where Advent structure can feel especially strong. In many towns, the season begins earlier in mood, not necessarily in gifts. Markets play a major role. The Christkind market idea, or Christmas market in general, creates a public winter space. Stalls, lights, warm drinks, crafts, and slow walking. Even if you do not buy much, you can absorb the season simply by being there. Advent calendars are also strongly associated with German-speaking regions. A daily window, a daily chocolate, a daily small picture. Again, it is a counted sequence, one gentle step at a time. Gift bringers in this region can vary by area and family tradition. St. Nicholas may visit in early December in some households. Christkind may be the main gift bringer in others. In many areas, Christmas Eve is the key family moment. The evening of December 24th can carry the main meal and the main gift exchange. This creates a different shape than a December 25th morning focus. Food traditions also vary by region, but there is often a sense of cozy baked goods, spices, breads, and pastries that feel like winter perfume. And in the background, the evergreen and candle layer stays present. If you drifted, here is the micro recap. In German-speaking regions, Advent structure and markets often set the mood, with Nicholas and Christkind traditions varying locally. Now we slide toward the Low Countries, where the calendar can feel like it has two peaks. In the Netherlands and parts of Belgium, Sinterklaas season is a major event. The key night is around December 5th into December 6th in many Dutch traditions. Children play shoes, sing songs, and sometimes leave treats for a horse. Gifts and poems can appear, sometimes with playful surprises. This creates an early gift season that is distinct from Christmas. Then Christmas can arrive with a different emphasis. For some families, Christmas is quieter and more focused on meals, church, or family time. For others, Christmas still includes gifts, but the scale may differ. This is a good reminder that traditions can coexist without conflict. Two gift seasons can share 1 month. The first is Sinterklaas, with its own stories and rhythms. The second is Christmas, with its own gatherings and visuals. This coexistence also helps explain why Santa does not replace Sinterklaas everywhere. Sinterklaas is not a beginner version of Santa for many families. He is the main character of his own season. Music in this region includes Sinterklaas songs that are distinct from Christmas carols. So the sound layer shifts by week, not only by country. If you are still awake, we are simply traveling north into longer nights. Now we arrive in Scandinavia, where the word for Christmas often echoes an older word for Yule. In Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, you may hear Yule as the season name. Alongside church calendars, there are strong household customs that feel older in tone. One widely known figure type is the Nis or Tomte. These are small household spirits in folklore associated with farms and home guardianship. They are not exactly Santa, though they can blend in modern imagery. Traditions sometimes include leaving a bowl of rice porridge as an offering. The porridge is a simple, warm food perfectly suited to winter. In story terms, offering it maintains household harmony. In practical terms, it is a small ritual of care and continuity. Scandinavia also has a distinctive light tradition in mid-December. St. Lucia Day, on December 13th, includes light processions in several places, especially in Sweden. People wear white, carry candles, and sing in a calm, deliberate way. It is a striking example of winter light as community signaling. The date falls early enough to shape the season before Christmas week arrives. So in parts of Scandinavia, the light layer peaks on its own day, then flows onward. Food traditions often include spiced drinks, baked goods, and hearty winter meals. But the exact menu varies by region and family. Again, the key is pattern. A warm table, a household spirit story, and a light procession that marks the dark month. If you drifted, the calm summary is this. In Scandinavia, Yule blends church time with folklore spirits and strong light customs like Lucia. Now we move to France and neighboring regions, where Christmas can feel both national and intensely regional. France has a well-known meal rhythm called the Réveillon in many places. This is the late evening meal, often associated with Christmas Eve and sometimes linked to midnight mass. In some families, it is the main feast stretching late into the night. That timing fits older church patterns, where worship and feasting bracket the night. Food details vary, but there is often a sense of indulgence and careful courses. The meal becomes a ritual of time, not just taste. In the South, Provence is famous for nativity traditions with local figurines. The Santon style we mentioned earlier can include village characters besides sacred figures. This is a vivid example of blending the universal and the local. A nativity becomes a small model of a region's identity. In neighboring regions across borders, similar craft traditions appear with different styles. Clay, wood, fabric, and painted figures become heritage objects. Music traditions can include both church carols and local songs. And as with many places in Europe, the exact balance between church and household differs by family. If you are still awake, we are simply noting how one country can contain many Christmases at once. Now we add the final layer for this first Atlas section: migration. Migration is one of the most powerful carriers of tradition. A family that moves often clings to rituals as a form of stability. A recipe, a song, a date, a particular figure who visits. These become heritage markers. They say we are still us, even in a new place. Sometimes the ritual becomes even more deliberate abroad than it was at home, because it is no longer the default. You have to choose it actively. This is why immigrant communities often preserve older forms longer. They keep the version they left with, like a snapshot. Meanwhile, the homeland version continues evolving, so a tradition can split into two living branches. One in the old country, one in the new one. This is how the Christmas tree, Santa imagery, and many foods traveled globally. But it is also how local saints and special dates survived. People do not only export the biggest symbols, they export the small ones too. A shoe by the hearth, a specific pastry, a particular carol sung in a particular language. These small rituals keep identity warm. If you drifted, keep the soft recap. In Northern and Western Europe, Christmas is a patchwork of dates, foods, figures, and songs carried and reshaped by migration. From here, we widen the lens. We go south and east, and then across oceans. And we watch how climate and history reshape the same symbols. Now we widen the lens beyond Northern and Western Europe. We will keep the same calm template: date, food, figure, music. And we will remember that every region contains many Christmases. Let us begin in Southern Europe, where the season often stretches longer. In Spain, the biggest gift moment can arrive with Epiphany on January 6th. Many towns hold parades for the Three Kings, a public story told with lights and music. Children may leave shoes out and wake to gifts linked to the kings. December 25th still matters for family meals and church for many households. But the calendar can feel like it has a second peak in early January. Food traditions often cluster around long meals shared across generations. The season becomes less about one morning and more about repeated gatherings. In Italy, nativity scenes called Principi can be a central focus. Some families add figures gradually, turning the scene into a living calendar. La Befana arrives around Epiphany in many traditions, bringing treats to children. So Italy can hold both sacred storytelling and playful gifting in the same season. In some towns, processions and pageants keep the public rhythm of the holiday. In others, the holiday is mostly inside homes, with food and family as the anchor. If you are still awake, we are simply crossing another border on the map. Now we move into Eastern Europe and Russia, where the calendar can shift noticeably. In several Orthodox Christian traditions, Christmas is observed later than December 25th. This is often because of older calendar systems used for liturgical dates. So you may see Christmas on January 7th in some communities. At the same time, New Year celebrations can carry many Christmas-like features. Trees, lights, and family meals may cluster around the New Year in some places. In Russia and nearby cultures, Ded Moroz, Grandfather Frost, is a major winter gift figure. He often appears with a companion figure, and the visit can center on New Year. This pattern was shaped by many historical changes, including 20th century politics. The calm takeaway is that winter celebration can move on the calendar without losing its meaning. A tree on December 31st can feel as seasonal as a tree on December 25th. Music and community gatherings still do the same job: warmth and belonging. Food often remains the steady center, even when dates differ. If you drifted, remember the soft summary. In the East, dates can shift, and New Year can carry the festive load. Now we travel across the Atlantic to Mexico and parts of Latin America, where visiting traditions are vivid. One well-known practice is the posadas, often held for 9 nights. These visits reenact a search for shelter, moving from house to house with songs. The 9-night structure usually runs from December 16th through December 24th. Hospitality is the lesson and also the practice. A host welcomes guests, even if only with a small treat and warm drink. This is winter mutual support in ritual form. Processions can be gentle and community-centered, with candles or lanterns in some places. Piñatas often appear as both party object and teaching tool. The classic star shape has points that can be explained symbolically in some traditions. But even without symbolism, it functions as shared play and shared sweetness. The season can feel like repeated evenings rather than one single day. That repetition is part of what makes it memorable and calming. If you are still awake, we are simply following the rhythm of visiting across oceans. Now we arrive in the United States and Canada, where pluralism becomes the default shape. These countries became meeting places for many immigrant traditions. The Christmas tree, Santa, carols, and regional foods all arrive in layers. A household might keep a Saint Day from one heritage and a Santa Day from another. Food can be the most durable marker of origin. One family keeps a specific pastry, another keeps a fish meal, another keeps a spiced drink. Music can also carry heritage, especially through choirs and church communities. In public spaces, language often shifts toward a broader holiday season. That can include Christmas, Hanukkah, and other winter observances depending on the community. So the public calendar can feel wide, while private homes keep their own precise rituals. This is a modern version of the old pattern we saw in Europe: coexistence without choosing one. If you drifted, the calm point is simple. North America is a layered mosaic, not a single script. Now we turn to Africa, and we do so carefully, because the continent holds immense variety. Christmas is celebrated in many African countries, often strongly through church life and community gatherings. In many places, music is central, especially choirs and long services. Some communities hold night vigils that move slowly from darkness into morning light. That rhythm echoes older candle traditions, even when the technology is modern. Community meals and shared giving can be more prominent than private gift piles. In some regions, travel to visit extended family is one of the biggest seasonal events. In others, neighborhood gatherings and church programs create the main feeling of the season. Climate also varies widely across Africa, so Christmas can be cool, warm, rainy, or dry depending on location. The key is not one African Christmas, but many local Christmases shaped by local churches and local cultures. If you are still awake, we are simply keeping our descriptions broad and respectful, and letting variety be the point. Now we move into Asia, where the range is especially wide from country to country. In the Philippines, Christmas can be deeply religious and extended. A well-known practice is Simbang Gabi, a series of dawn or evening masses leading up to Christmas. This often runs for 9 days, from December 16th through December 24th. The schedule itself becomes a daily ritual, like an advent calendar made of footsteps. The Philippines also has strong lantern traditions, with star-shaped pearl decorations in many places, so light, devotion, and community are woven tightly together. In contrast, Japan's modern Christmas is often more secular and urban in tone. For many people in Japan, Christmas feels like a seasonal event rather than a religious holy day. Cities may emphasize lights, shopping, and a special meal shared with family or couples. Certain foods, like strawberry shortcake, became common seasonal symbols in Japan. Some people exchange small gifts, while New Year remains the major family holiday for many households. This is a good reminder that the same symbols can be remixed into different meanings. A tree and lights can signal devotion in one place and seasonal cheer in another. If you drifted, keep the soft summary. In Asia, Christmas ranges from deep liturgy to modern seasonal remix. Now we travel to Oceania, where the seasons flip. In Australia and New Zealand, Christmas falls in summer, so the imagery can shift from snow to sun without losing the holiday feeling. Families may gather for barbecues, outdoor meals, and beach visits. The core functions remain: time off, shared food, and family presence. But the environment changes the sensory palette completely. This is sometimes called seasonal inversion, and it can feel both familiar and strange. Some people in the Southern Hemisphere also playfully import winter aesthetics. A Christmas in July celebration can create the cozy winter mood when it is actually cold outside. So the holiday becomes portable, able to move between climates and still feel like itself. If you are still awake, we are simply letting climate reshape the surface while the structure stays steady. Now we gather our world tour into one calm takeaway. Across continents, Christmas is not one tradition, but a toolkit. Dates, meals, visiting, music, lights, and one or more gift figures. Every culture selects a set of tools and arranges them into a local pattern. History, religion, climate, and migration all influence that arrangement. And yet, the repeating imagery still makes sense. Light in darkness, green in winter, food in scarcity, and care in community. After this world tour, we can return to one pivotal moment when many modern expectations locked into place. We can return to the Victorian era. Now we return to one pivotal moment, a quiet hinge in history. The 19th century, especially the Victorian era, amplified Christmas. It did not invent every tradition, but it synchronized them, polished them, and broadcast them. It is one of the main reasons Christmas feels so uniform today. Let us start with the basic social machinery of the era: railways and newspapers. Before railways, travel was slower and less predictable. Before mass newspapers, ideas traveled unevenly. In the 19th century, both accelerate. People move more easily between cities and regions. Goods move more easily too. And stories move faster than ever. A new custom in one town can become known in another within weeks, not generations. This is how synchronization begins. A season becomes a shared season when people share the same cues. Urban life also changes the emotional tone of winter. Cities grow crowded, noisy, and scheduled. Work becomes more clock-based. In that environment, home becomes a symbol. Not just a building, but an ideal. The Victorian era develops a strong nostalgia for domestic warmth. Even people living in tight rooms can imagine the perfect household scene. So Christmas becomes a stage for home feeling. A day when you can pretend the world is slower. If you are still awake, we are simply watching technology and emotion cooperate. Now we come to a single story that helps set expectations. Charles Dickens and A Christmas Carol. One book does not control an entire culture by itself. But certain stories arrive at the right moment and then echo everywhere. A Christmas Carol becomes a moral script for the season. It emphasizes charity, empathy, and the possibility of personal change. The message is not only give money, it is also notice people. Notice family, workers, neighbors, and strangers. This story gives Christmas a moral center that feels accessible. It is not mainly about doctrine. It is about human warmth. That makes it easy to adapt across different levels of religious belief. The tale also makes poverty and generosity part of the season's expected imagery. A cold street, a warm table, a choice to share. Once a story like this becomes widely read and performed, it shapes what people think Christmas should feel like. Even if they do not quote it, they absorb its mood. The story also pairs well with the era's print culture. It is republished, dramatized, illustrated, and retold. Retelling is how a message becomes tradition. If you drifted, the soft summary is that Dickens helped make Christmas a season of moral warmth in the public imagination. Now we move to the home, because the Victorian era makes domestic display respectable and expected. We already trace the tree, cards, and carols as they spread. Here is what changes in the Victorian period. They become norms, not quirks. They become what respectable households do. This connects to changing ideas about childhood. Victorian culture places new emphasis on children as emotionally precious. Parenting ideals shift toward nurturing, protection, and guided innocence. So Christmas becomes more child-centered. Not everywhere and not instantly, but strongly enough to leave a lasting mark. A tree with gifts beneath it makes perfect sense in that new ideal. It turns the living room into a gentle theater for childhood wonder. Cards support the same domestic display. A home with cards on the mantle looks connected, socially active, and polite. Decorations become a kind of household language. They say, we are participating in respectable seasonal culture. This is also when certain colors and objects stabilize. Evergreen holly, candles, snow scenes, and warm indoor light. Once these appear in enough homes and enough prints, they stop feeling optional. They become the season's uniform. If you are still awake, we are simply noticing how social pressure can look like tradition. Now we turn to retail, which becomes more organized in the same era. The Victorian period sees the growth of department stores and modern shopping districts. These spaces are designed for browsing. Window displays become a public art form. A decorated window teaches you what the season looks like. It shows you which objects belong to Christmas. The store becomes a seasonal instructor. It also becomes a seasonal planner. Instead of buying gifts informally, people begin planning them. Lists develop because choice expands. When a shop offers hundreds of possible gifts, the brain needs structure. So the wish list and the shopping list begin to feel practical. Retail also standardizes timing. If stores decorate early, the season starts earlier in the public eye. If stores run special Christmas departments, the season feels like an economic event. This does not erase older religious calendars, but it overlays them with a new rhythm. A rhythm of buying, wrapping, and preparing. This is where the modern idea of a Christmas rush grows. Again, we do not need to judge it harshly. We can simply observe it. Christmas becomes not only a feast, but a planned project. And projects invite checklists. If you drifted, the calm point is that retail architecture teaches and extends the season. Now we move from private homes and stores to public rituals. The Victorian era is famous for organized charity and civic celebration. Charity existed long before, but organization expands. Societies, churches, and newspapers coordinate collections. Public appeals become seasonal events. Carols are sung for charity. Funds are raised for the poor, for hospitals, for local causes. This makes giving visible and communal. It also makes giving feel like part of citizenship. Schools contribute too. School performances and concerts turn Christmas into a community calendar item. Children sing, parents attend, and the season becomes audible in public halls. Civic celebrations, such as tree lightings or holiday concerts, develop later in some places, but the groundwork is here. The idea that Christmas has public programming, not just private observance, becomes normal. This is also where calendars synchronize further. If the whole town attends the concert, the season begins when the concert begins. If a newspaper prints a seasonal poem, it anchors the mood in print. Public rituals create shared memory. And shared memory is what tradition is made of. If you are still awake, we are simply moving from many households to one shared seasonal timeline. Now we arrive at the key mechanism that makes customs feel ancient: repetition. Once a custom is repeated, it gains weight. After a few years, people stop remembering the first time they did it. After a generation, children assume it has always been that way. This is why the Victorian turning point matters. The era produces so much repetition at scale through print, retail, and public events. A tree appears in images year after year. Cards arrive every year. Carols are printed and taught every year. Santa appears in advertisements every year. Once the loop runs long enough, the symbols become dominant. And dominant symbols crowd out less visible alternatives. Not because they are better, but because they are everywhere. This explains why a few images dominate across climates. Snow scenes travel to warm countries. Evergreens appear where they do not grow naturally. A red-suited Santa appears beside local gift figures. The Victorian era and its successors built a template that could export. A template is convenient. It gives a clear picture of what to do and what to buy. So the template spreads and repetition turns it into tradition. This is our open loop payoff. We promised earlier that one Victorian trend reshaped almost everything. That trend is mass repetition through media and markets anchored in domestic ideals. Once those forces align, Christmas becomes stable, recognizable, and widely shared. If you drifted, here is the micro recap. 19th century media and transport synchronize ideas. Dickens shapes the moral mood. Domestic display becomes respectable. Retail expands the season. Public rituals spread it, and repetition makes it feel ancient. Now we can gently fact-check the myths, and we can explain why the same images repeat year after year, even across climates. That is our next chapter. Now we do a gentle bit of tidying. Not a debate, just a soft cleanup. We will look at why certain images repeat and why a few myths keep circulating. Think of it as straightening a room after a long, cozy gathering. Let us begin with the biggest repeating image of all, snow. Even people who live in warm climates often picture Christmas as snowy. Why does snow dominate the holiday imagination? Part of the answer is geography and publishing. Modern Christmas imagery was standardized heavily in Northern Europe and North America. Those regions have winter snow often enough to make it a natural seasonal symbol. Publishers, card makers, and later filmmakers in those regions produced a lot of material. That material traveled widely. So snow becomes the default background. It is visual shorthand for winter, even when it is not locally true. The 19th century helped here through prints and cards. Later, film and popular songs amplify it. A famous phrase like White Christmas becomes an aesthetic ideal, not a weather report. It suggests purity, quietness, and a softened world. Snow muffles sound. It smooths sharp edges. It makes streets look slower. So snow fits the mood people want from the season. Even when the forecast is rain, the imagination chooses snow. If you are still awake, we are simply noticing how exported art can replace local climate in the mind. Now we move from snow to shapes. Stars, bells, circles, and other simple symbols. These motifs keep showing up because they are easy to read at a glance. A star is instantly recognizable. So is a bell. So is a circle, like a wreath or an ornament. These shapes work well in dim light, which is when many holiday scenes take place. Candlelight, street lights, tree lights. In low light, complex images blur. Simple shapes remain legible. This is one reason wreaths and ornaments are such effective visual shorthand. A wreath is also a circle, and circles carry calm associations. No beginning, no end, a loop that feels continuous. Bells also have a practical history. They signal gatherings and events, so they fit the idea of people coming together. Stars, in Christian context, connect to guidance and nativity imagery. But even outside that context, a star says night sky, and night sky says winter. So the symbol works on multiple levels at once. Ornaments, meanwhile, are small light catchers. They turn a tree into a constellation. And because they are small and repeatable, they create pattern. The brain likes pattern. Pattern is calming. If you drifted, remember the soft point. Christmas symbols often survive because they are simple, readable shapes that work in low light. Now we turn to food, because food is one of the strongest memory anchors we have. Feasts and comfort foods persist because smell and repetition are powerful. A smell can open a memory faster than a photograph. Spice, citrus, baked sugar, warm fat, pine, smoke. These scents mark the season before you even name it. Special once-a-year foods also create a sense of time. If you eat a certain dish only in December, then December becomes distinct. The ritual does not have to be grand. It can be a specific cookie, a specific soup, a specific bread. The important part is repetition. A food repeated yearly becomes a reliable cue. It tells the body, this is that season again. And in winter, reliable cues feel safe. Comfort foods also tend to be dense. They are warm, rich, and filling. Historically, that density made sense in cold months. It helped people stay warm and use stored ingredients. Even now, when heating is modern, the food tradition keeps its emotional logic. Warm food equals care. A table set with familiar dishes equals belonging. That is why the family meal remains central across many cultures, even when other customs change. If you are still awake, we are simply moving from images to senses. Now we do a few gentle myth checks, like putting labels on jars. First myth: Christmas was always like this. It was not. Traditions can form quickly when media and markets repeat them. A practice repeated for 20 or 30 years can feel ancient to the people living in it. A child who grows up with a tree and cards assumes they always existed. By the time that child is old, the custom feels old too. So we should not underestimate how fast cultural habits can stabilize. The Victorian era is the classic example. Once printing, rail travel, and retail align, a template can spread within a lifetime. That does not make it fake. It just makes it recent. Second myth: one soda company invented Santa. This is an oversimplification. Santa's look and story were shaped over many decades by poems, illustrations, and regional customs. Advertising campaigns did help popularize a friendly, standardized Santa image in the 20th century. They amplified what already existed and made it feel even more uniform. But the character did not appear from nowhere in one campaign. The truth is more gradual, and therefore less catchy. And that is why the myth persists. Simple origin stories are satisfying. They let the mind stop searching. Third myth: Christmas is entirely pagan. This claim is also too simple. Christmas traditions are layered. Some elements draw on pre-Christian winter practices. Some draw on Christian liturgy and saints. Some draw on medieval and early modern folk life. And many draw on modern industrial society, like cards and department stores. Blending is normal in culture. People adopt what feels meaningful and useful. They reinterpret older symbols in new frameworks. So instead of one pure origin, we have a woven fabric. If you drifted, keep the calm summary. Most Christmas myths are oversimplifications that flatten a layered history. Now we close the open loops without waking anyone up. What changed quickly? The standardization. Print, pictures, radio, film, and shopping created a shared template fast. This is why snow scenes and red-suited Santas can appear almost anywhere. What changed slowly? The calendar seasons, the foods, and the local rhythm of visiting and worship. Those tend to endure because they are embedded in family life and community schedules. So Christmas looks both old and new at the same time. Old in its deep seasonal logic. New in its mass media uniform. And with that, we can let the story settle. We have traced how symbols repeat, how myths form, and why the holiday looks so familiar across the world. All that's left is a quiet recap, like smoothing a blanket after the last page of a book. If you want more low-stimulation learning, choose another long video from ZZZ Science. Space, oceans, or biology all work well for sleepy listening. Start it from the beginning tonight and let it run softly in the background. Good night.